This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. Ebola claims the life of a child in Uganda. 2 other cases are confirmed, all linked to the outbreak in the DR Congo.
Our border with the DRC is so porous, and we've managed to add another 5 screening points. The side is the main point of entry, which is Bondwe.
In Sudan, businesses in the capital city, Khartoum, begin to reopen after a campaign of civil disobedience is called off. We meet the entrepreneur on a mission to get more women into Africa's tech sector. And in sport, Nigeria are victorious at the Women's World Cup, winning their first game in France by beating South Korea. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa on BBC World News. Ugandan health officials say a 5-year-old boy has died from Ebola, the country's first case since the latest outbreak in neighboring DR Congo started just under a year ago. Now, the boy is said to have traveled across the border with his family from DRC on Sunday. He was then taken to a Ugandan hospital after exhibiting symptoms including vomiting blood. Now, officials said his grandmother and younger brother also had the disease. More than 2,000 cases have been recorded in DR Congo in the last 10 months, most of which have been fatal. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to Dr. Masidiso Rebecca Mweti, the Regional Director of the WHO Office for Africa. She told me what happens to those who came into contact with the people infected.
The investigation is going on now to establish the number of contacts, other people, and instigate the appropriate measures, both on the DRC side, where this initial person died, and also in Uganda, the contacts that this family have had.
What's been the conclusion of the meeting that was held today at the border town in Kasese between the WHO, Uganda, and DRC health officials?
So what we know has been the result of this meeting is that the country has developed an initial 72-hour emergency response plan. And the interaction with the DRC authorities has been to provide some technical support to them, in addition to providing doses of vaccine. I believe 500 doses of vaccine have been provided to Uganda. So that plan that the country has put in place after this meeting includes clearly sensitizing the community, further sensitizing the population about the risk of Ebola, how to protect themselves from being infected, as well as that to strengthen the border crossing screenings, to stop any mass gatherings of people, including events like funerals and weddings, unfortunately, simply to act to ensure that we don't have the circumstances where large numbers of people are gathered in unsafe conditions and transmission can occur.
Sorry, carry on.
Now, I was saying, in addition to that, of course, is the intention to immediately start the vaccination process, meaning vaccinating the contacts of these cases in what we call a ring vaccination. The immediate contacts, people that they've been in touch with, both in the family, in the neighborhood, and in health facilities, and so forth.
There's a debate as to whether the confirmed cases should be transferred back to DR Congo. What are the plans here?
The surrounding countries that we've worked with are prepared to manage these cases as they arise. In general, we do not at all encourage sending cases back to the place where they got infected. My understanding of the situation, and we're still trying to gather more information, was that these were people who had connections, family connections in the DRC, but who were in fact living in Uganda and had gone across the border to visit a relative who is unwell and have now crossed over to go back home.
All right, Dr. Masidiso Moeti, thank you for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa and clarifying that for us. Thank you. Now, elsewhere, the political stalemate continues in Sudan as pro-democracy protesters face off with the military men in charge. The Freedom and Change Alliance has suspended a nationwide strike, which they called in the wake of an armed crackdown in which more than 100 people were killed. Catherine Biaruhanga reports.
The end of the civil disobedience campaign has come as a relief to a lot of Sudanese, especially those who rely on a daily wage and had to go out to go to work or open up their small businesses. And to those who also had to run important errands like finding food. All eyes are now on the international mediation efforts to try and get the opposition groups and the military council talking again. Today, the United States Assistant Secretary for African Affairs, Tibor Nagy, arrived in Khartoum. We don't have access to his meetings, but the idea really is to try and get the military and the opposition talking very soon. The Ethiopian envoy, who's been mediating between the two sides, said concessions have been made. The opposition have called off the nationwide strike, whilst the military have said that they will release political prisoners. So talks are expected to resume soon, but the big question is whether the military are ready to hand over power to civilians. We've heard from military representatives who say that they do believe they are the custodians for security in Sudan during this transition. And it seems unlikely that they will be handing over full control to civilians just yet.
Catherine Biaruhanga reporting there from Khartoum. Let's now take a quick look at some of the other stories making news in Africa and around the world. Security forces in Ghana have rescued 2 Canadian women abducted last week in the country's second largest city, Kumasi. Ghana's information ministry says 8 suspects, including 3 Nigerian nationals and 5 Ghanaians, were arrested in the early morning raid. They rescued women who were in volunteers for an international NGO are said to be in good health. The Global Peace Index is out today. It ranks 163 countries in terms of how peaceful they are. Mauritius is the highest ranked African country. It dropped 4 places to number 124. South Sudan is at the other end of the scale. It's at 161, ranked low because of risk and disaster. Afghanistan is the worst ranked country in the world. Environmental activists in Kenya have been demonstrating in Nairobi today to protest the construction of a coal-fired station. They say the project in Lamu will be economically and ecologically disastrous for the area. In South Africa, it's believed a labor dispute is behind an increase in truck and in South Africa. Over the past 2 weeks, attacks have escalated. We have 60 trucks that were burnt and they were looted. This continued violence could have dire consequences on the struggling economy, as 4 out of 5 goods transported in South Africa is done by road. The BBC's Nomsa Masego reports.
Calling for divine intervention for an industry that's come under siege. Over the past 18 months, attacks on truck drivers have increased in frequency and viciousness here in South Africa.
We pass here twice a week.
It's been more than a week since driver Jan Jansen was forced to leave his best friend and brother-in-law on the side of the road after his truck was petrol bombed.
You see here is Bernard's truck was standing here. The front of his cab was more or less where that ash is lying.
The 2 drivers pulled over their vehicles to rest and were asleep when unknown assailants set their trucks alight.
There was trucks involved that carry food, that carry clothing, and they didn't steal 1 piece of clothes, 1 piece of tin of food. They also and always attack the truck, start burning it.
It's believed the attacks are as a result of a labor dispute in which trucking companies are accused of hiring foreign drivers and overlooking experienced locals. The South African government has described these attacks as an act of economic sabotage.
The law will prevail, and in this particular instance, our law enforcement agencies are working very hard to ensure that those who are perpetrating this are brought to book. They are using what we call a guerrilla tactic, hit and run.
The Road Freight Association estimates that since March last year, more than 200 truck drivers have been killed and over 1,300 vehicles damaged. A specialized police unit has been set up to patrol motorways where these attacks are most prevalent. Nomsa Masego, BBC News, South Africa.
BBC Focus on Africa. Coming up, Caster Semenya hits the track for the first time since she appealed her IAAF suspension. Could she make a winning return? You're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top story on this program: Ebola claims the life of a child in Uganda. 2 other cases confirmed, all linked to the outbreak in the DR Congo. In Sudan, businesses in the capital city Khartoum begin to reopen after a campaign of civil disobedience is called off. Well, let's stay with that story on Ebola, and let's get the latest report here from Dia Jenna in Kampala.
The 2 newly confirmed cases in Uganda are the brother and grandmother of a 5-year-old who died hours after he was confirmed as the first case of Ebola in the country in 7 years. The victim had contracted the disease from the DRC, where his mother had been taking care of his grandmother, who had caught the virus and later died. The 5-year-old will be buried in Uganda. As Uganda moves to contain the outbreak, the country's health minister announced a number of measures, including the ban on mass gatherings.
The Ministry of Health, WHO and CDC will undertake ring vaccination of contacts to the case and other non-vaccinated frontline health workers, as well as other workers beginning 14th June 2019.
Health officials in Uganda and the DRC met today to discuss a joint response to the latest threat. They agreed to repatriate 5 suspected cases currently in an isolation unit at Bwera Hospital. In neighboring DRC, the WHO says that the outbreak so far has killed more than 1,200 people. The country's Minister of Health admits there are challenges.
Just to remind everybody that it's a very complex outbreak in a very complex zone with population, dense population moving around between all the cities, and it's really a challenge and a success for all the teams to contain the outbreak.
And in the coming days, health officials in Uganda said they will be monitoring closely as many as 50 people who have come into close contact with either suspected cases or those who are infected, and will start vaccination rounds. Victoria Wonghunda, BBC News.
Nigeria now, because the country has been marking Democracy Day today. Foreign dignitaries were invited to the event. Instead, President Muhammadu Buhari's inauguration at the end of May. Now, officials say the country could not afford to hold 2 high-profile events in the space of 2 weeks. Ishaq Khalid reports.
When President Muhammadu Buhari was sworn in about 2 weeks ago, he didn't deliver any speech at this particular arena, Eagle Square in the Nigerian capital. But today he delivered a 32-minute speech. Most of his words centered around economy, around insecurity, and around fighting corruption. But overall, his speech is a reassuring speech, reassuring Nigerians that his government is ready and is going to tackle most of the challenges the country is facing. Despite the assurances from President Muhammadu Buhari, many Nigerians are saying that what they need is action, to see change in reality on the ground.
Baba came into this country, nothing is starting all over again. So that's the situation we are. And we know it's taking us now. Things are getting gradually. You can see from the agricultural aspect, and then the education too, we're coming up, power is coming up. Hopefully the next 4 years will get better by the grace of God.
Our problem is the insecurity. My people are dying every day. My sons are dying every day. Always I am facing problem. Always we don't have rest of mind. People are desperate, into hard condition of insecurity.
This occasion is basically to celebrate Nigeria's democracy, 20 years since the end of military rule in the country, and President Muhammadu Buhari used the occasion to defend his election as free, fair, credible and peaceful. The election was held in February, but the opposition are still challenging the results, saying that it was rigged, and the court process is still going on. But the president is saying that he is here to stay, to work for Nigeria and to make Nigeria better.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport now. And Nigeria were in action at the Women's World Cup. Our very own Mimi Fawaz is there. And Mimi, finally a win for the Super Falcons for us to celebrate.
Absolutely, Sophie. Finally a win for Nigeria and finally a win for Africa after both South Africa and Cameroon lost their opening matches. Nigeria came back after that loss to Norway in their opening match, getting 2-0 against South Africa today. And of course, that star, the three-time African Female Footballer of the Year, Asisat Oshoala, netted in the winning goal. Behind here in the stadium, there was an uproar. Lots of fans, lots of children actually from school came to watch today, and everyone was incredibly thrilled to see her put the Super Falcons forward in that match.
They're facing France next. Title favorites, do you think they can beat them?
Oh, of course, yes. Why? We are going to carry the call.
Yeah.
We have started, we will finish it.
Yes.
But you're facing the title one of the title favorites, France next. Can they get away, Nigeria?
Yes. Nigeria will win France.
Yes. Face France next, who are the title favorites. Do you think they can get a win?
I think we're going to get a win. Which is, I think we're going to get a win. We have a divided house. My wife is French, and I'm Nigerian. And my son's in the middle, but I think, who do you think is going to win Monday?
So you say Nigeria. Your son says France.
Yeah.
So, of course, we can see that the fans were really thrilled after Nigeria defeated South Korea 2-0. Next up, they face France, who are seen as one of the title favorites in the tournament. It's going to be a very, very tough match for Nigeria if they stand a chance of coming out of that group. France are very strong technically, both in defense and both in attack. So Nigeria have started working on their defensive errors, but they have a lot of work to do if they're to get 3 points against France.
And Mimi, just before you go, what are the highlights for the next few days?
Well, coming up tomorrow is the turn of South Africa. Now, South Africa is one of the teams as well that a lot of people will be looking to because they're debutants in this tournament. And though they lost against Spain, people are hoping that they can bounce back against China. And they've got the current African Female Footballer of the Year, Thembi Gatlana, who'll be featuring.
All right, Mimi Fawaz there. I'm sure you're having a really, really good time. Thanks for that. Now to athletics, and Caster Semenya, South Africa's world and Olympic 800-meter champion, cruised to victory over 2,000 meters at a meet in Paris. It was her first race since filing an appeal against the IAAF's rules on restricting testosterone levels in female runners. Now, the IAAF has been given until the 25th of June by the Swiss Supreme Court to lodge their response, but Semenya is not concerned about that and is fully focused on her running.
I'm going to focus on myself. I'm not anyone. If they have a problem with me, I don't have a problem with them. So that's their business, not worry, not mine. So as an athlete, you focus on delivering. I came here to deliver. I delivered, so that will be my worry to perform. So yeah.
Now, Naby Keita has been named in Guinea's final 23-man squad for the Africa Cup of Nations finals, despite admitting that he is not yet fully fit to play. The Liverpool midfielder is still recovering from the groin injury that he sustained in the first leg of the Champions League semi-final against Barcelona. That's on the 1st of May. Keita said he hoped to be fit for Guinea's Nations Cup opening Group B match against Madagascar on the 22nd of June. Algeria coach Jamel Belmadi has confirmed that Haris Belekebela has been dropped from the Africa Cup of Nations squad. Belmadi explained that it was in order to maintain discipline in the squad ahead of the finals in Egypt, which begin later this month. His omission follows video footage of Belkebla appearing on social media, exposing his backside on a live stream of online game. And that's the sport for now. But technology startup sector in Africa is big business, but more often than not, it's men who are in the top jobs. Only 9% of African women are in the tech field. My colleague Lisa Marie Mishtak met up with Annie Akpe, the founder of African Women in Tech, and started by asking her how she encourages women to get involved in technology.
African Women in Technology is a 3-day conference, hands-on workshop. We actually do a lot of deep diving. We go into what it takes to be an entrepreneur, what it takes to have a career in technology, what are the things that you need to know, investments, typical questions that women would need to know when they have an interest in technology sector.
What advice would you give to a woman who's deciding to start a career in technology?
I definitely say go network. I believe that networking and understanding all the different positions, because it's not just coding. You know, there's design thinking. You know, there's people that just do communications within technology because they understand it. So for them, being in public relations communication is key. There's so many different positions within technology that it's not just one sector of technology. I think at the very beginning of their journey, some of the challenges that women are facing is funding, which is #1 global across all countries. The second thing is being able to be in the technology sector and understand where you fit, what roles you're playing, and what you can actually add value within a technology.
The tech industry is still heavily male-dominated. What can men do to help support women in the tech industry?
You know, that's a very interesting question in terms of men, because I didn't get African Women in Technology started without the men. They saw the value in it. They understood the benefit of having women that could go to these events and get the, you know, the deep dive hands-on training that you would get at other conferences. The key with the event was keeping it free, or keeping it at very nominal entry fee costs. So by doing that, it allowed the demographics to be expanded so we could actually capture a bigger audience. Technology was just not a field that women were getting into because they truly didn't understand it. Culturally, our parents are always telling us doctors, lawyers, engineers. Those are the 3 main categories, including nursing, that they push, not necessarily technology, but understanding technology allows them to get out of those preconceived notions of what it is and what it isn't. And understanding it allows us to be able to educate the young women that we want to come into the sector and understanding the values that they would bring in.
Annie Akpe is the founder of African Women in Tech. Let's now take a quick look at our top stories today on Focus on Africa. Health officials have said a 5-year-old boy in Uganda has died from Ebola. Now, the death is the first in Uganda amid a deadly outbreak in a neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. The boy is said to have traveled across the border with his family from DRC. Officials said his grandmother and younger brother also had the disease. More than 2,000 cases have been recorded in DR Congo in the last 10 months, most of which have been fatal. Uganda has already vaccinated about 4,700 health workers against the disease. That's according to a joint statement by WHO and Ugandan health officials. That's Focus on Africa for now. Thanks for your company.